Let's learn some Torah. So this week we are reading Parshat VAERA, and it is a moment of self-revelation. It's a moment where God shows more of God's self to Moshe, and through Moshe to the rest of the people and the rest of the world. In fact, if you look at the long arc of the stories that start with Breshit, that start with actually the Abraham and Sarah narratives, God has said all along this is what was going to happen. We would begin as a family and then as a burgeoning nation descend to a strange land where we'd be strangers and oppressed. And from that position of degradation, of having fallen, God would save us with great signs and wonders, otot and muftim, are the promises. That's what God said was going to happen, and in fact it does. Last week, the very beginning of Exodus, Vayakam melech hadash asher lo yada et Yosef, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And of course, anyone who knows anything recognizes that that's a choice. To not know your own nation's history, especially when you are the king or president or ruler, to actively ignore the contributions of any one individual or any group. And we have seen that in recent American history. And the world has seen that in other nationalist movements where someone comes to power and tries to erase the history of their nation or rewrite it. Revisionist history is a disease because it rewrites the past to conform with a specific and usually narrow totalitarian vision for what needs to happen in the future. It always comes at the expense of some. Part of the way this has applied in more recent history than we realize is to recognize that within the civil rights movement that did not only begin in the 60s, but of course came to incredible power and voice in the 60s, and not only because of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but especially because of the amplification that he gave to the work of so many and the ongoing work that needs to continue through us. Part of how the civil rights was about recovering the dignity of human life was not only, and I use air quotes for this, not only by increasing voting rights and talking about equality and the end of segregation and the implementation of justice, but also because when African people were enslaved and brought across the Atlantic as part of the slave trade, leading to these shores and others, part of what they were told is you have no history. James Baldwin writes about this eloquently, that to recover a personal tribal history, thinkers like Du Bois and many others were so much about recovering history. Pharaoh's denial of Joseph's presence in Egyptian history is not the same, but is similar. When you tell someone they have no history, then their story is entirely what you say it is. And that infected the Israelites so deeply that in this week's Parsha, chapter 6, verse 9, when Moshe brings language of redemption from God to the people, they couldn't even hear him. Why? Because of something called kotzer ruach, a shortness of breath, or a crushed spirit, as it's been explained elsewhere. And that's related to the word Mitzrayim, midrashically understood. Mitzrayim means Egypt, but it also means Meitzarim, constricting waters. If someone comes and tells you that things can be better, can you hear them? Speaking globally through the pandemic, which we are not done with, friends, so many people's hopes have shrunk. It's another way of saying that their breath has become attenuated. Their spirits can feel crushed. What's really important is, number one, for us to say that is not all we are. Yes, we have been through something that has squeezed us, but when we take our breaths every morning, we are taught by tradition to say, Modeh ani, moda ani lefanecha. God, I am grateful for today. And to take our breaths and to stretch our bodies and to straighten our backs, and with the straightening of the back is a blessing. Blessed are you, God, Zokef Kefufim, who straightens those who are bent over. When history, in Jewish history, has made us feel like this, we have to respond by standing like this. It is incredibly important for all of us, in our dignity, in our power, to call to mind our own history, to be grateful for this moment, to consider what it is to be alive, to flex our souls. Do we blame the Israelites for their incapacity? No, of course not. Do we understand the long tale of slavery? I don't think we're done understanding it. Do we understand the importance of history as a source of strength, knowledge, learning? Can we learn from where we have been so that we can respond to today with greater strength and wisdom? Can we look at the heroes of the civil rights movement who stood arm locked in arm? Can we see modern symbolic heroes on athletic fields and elsewhere who take a knee during the national anthem to still signify that this country was built in part on sin? Yes, there was a dream. Yes, independence. Yes, the dignity of fighting for civil rights. Yes, the increasing understanding of the vibrancy of a social landscape that includes LGBTQ brothers and sisters at the highest offices and under the chuppah. Yes, we understand the place of Jews in building American democracy. Yes, we understand what it is to have a truly multicultural system. But can we remember that the original, at least in the early 1900s, idea of the melting pot, where we thought that the American dream was to melt down into one thing? In truth, it's not. In truth, it's not that. That's not the shimmering idea of America. The shimmering idea of America is not one amalgamated thing. The idea of America is you and I each bring history. You and I each bring personal dignity. And if you think that you don't belong, I'm here to tell you in the name of Moshe Rabbeinu that your freedom matters too. That the image of God in which you've been created, that deserves all the space for breath that mine does, that anyone's does. And when we see a corner of the world where people aren't able to breathe fully, and we can think about names like Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, and many others, we have an incredible task in front of us, friends, which is to help those who have a hard time breathing. As Dr. King taught us, it's cruel. I'm not quoting him directly, I'm paraphrasing. It's cruel to tell someone to pick themselves up by their own bootstraps when they don't have boots at all. The system that we live in leaves many people behind. For 3 years, we used the phrase essential workers, but what we were really describing were people who could not afford not to work and who risked their lives to do their jobs. That's the bulk of so many that we called essential workers. Of course, we also mean doctors and nurses and paramedics and orderlies and those who stocked pharmacies, who actively, explicitly were about saving lives. But I also mean the people who stocked the shelves in a supermarket and the people who collected the garbage and the recycling. When it comes to the language of this week's Parsha, it is so important for us, friends, to recognize that being short of breath is a modern situation. Moshe's language of liberation is still unimaginable for so many. And that means that you and I, who have the privilege of taking this time every day to find each other, to learn Torah, and the gift of finding each other, having the technology and the time and all of the things that give me the privilege of being part of this community. Yes, we are, of course, as Deborah says, exhausted. Of course. So I wish you rest and strength. And the purpose of that rest and strength, the purpose of all of these blessings we're offering each other, is so that we don't have kotzer ruach anymore. We can have ruach aroch. We can have a strong and extended spirit, so much that we'll find each other. We'll do good for someone else. The worst mistake we can make about yesterday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, is if we think yesterday is a day of service and today is not. Today is a day of service. And our service has to be about making sure that everyone has the breath they need, the strength, healing, and dignity they deserve. Everyone is seen as the image of God that they are. And that means reading the Torah. That means reading the Torah and hearing how current it is. So friends, I want to bless you. I want to bless you with the strength it takes to breathe, so that you can bring in that strength and offer it to somebody else. It's the greatest gift, being there for someone else. Moshe was there for us when we couldn't accept, hear, internalize, channel, believe. So friends, let's believe. Let's believe. Let's go into a good day. See you tomorrow. Bless you, friends. See you tomorrow. Have a good day.